Hey everybody, this is Andy Hall. You're watching Best Advice Ever. It's the show where awesome people come on and share the best advice they ever got. Today, our guest is Dr. David Kyle Johnson. He does gaggles of things. Yes, I said it, gaggles. He's a professor over at King's College in Pennsylvania. He writes for Psychology Today. He writes for the great courses. He is a philosopher. He likes philosophy of science. And David, how are you doing today? Can I call you David?
I'm doing
Is that
great.
okay?
I go by Kyle, actually, so you can call me Kyle.
Kyle, all right, I'll call you Kyle. So we talked the other day on the Daily Atheist, and we had a really great conversation about all kinds of stuff. And it's great that you come on. That you're coming on the Best Advice Ever.
Yeah, hey, thanks for coming. Thanks for having me on. It ought to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, that's what we're all about here: sharing wisdom and having fun.
That sounds great. I can't wait.
Great. So, what are you doing now that the COVID-19 crisis is here? Are you teaching people online? Is that what you're doing?
So King's College moved online, and I just heard last night that we're going to go online for the rest of the semester. It was originally till Easter, but we're going to go for the rest of the semester. So I set up my home office here and brought my work computer home, and I'm teaching remotely, which has gone pretty well so far, actually. I'm not doing any kind of synchronous, have everybody Zoom in at the same time, because I just don't think all my students have a good enough internet connection for doing that. So I've been recording videos and posting them, answering their questions. Instead of doing lectures, I let them post questions and I just record videos where I answer their questions. So we've been doing that and trying to stay in as much as possible. We've stocked up on food and that kind of stuff so we can last for a while because I suspect it's going to really hit hard here in Pennsylvania here pretty soon, and we'll just stay inside for a month while it goes by, hopefully, and hopefully it won't last much longer than that, but we'll have to see. But yeah, it's not too bad. My wife teaches for the public schools, and they've canceled class entirely, not even homeschooling, like they're not even doing remote teaching or anything like that. So kind of living the dream in a certain kind of way if we didn't have to worry about accidentally, bringing home a COVID from a, trip to the grocery store or something like that, right? Like living the dream. So not too bad.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad things are working well for you over there. It sounds like you got a good system set up for teaching. Yeah,
it's pretty nice. I wish my internet connection was a little bit faster. That way I could be on my computer instead of my phone. Right now I'm actually trying to work on that, but the internet provider is a little backed up, so I was a couple days wait for a call back to see if we can figure that out. So
sure. Yeah. To live is to hope, right? To live is to hope. So hey, this is a great place to pivot to the best advice you ever got.
Yeah, so I've thought about this, and I have two definitions of advice in mind when you ask about what the best advice you ever got. One would be like one way to understand the term would be like some saying or some advice that you can take with you and like live every day. So like every day you could think about this piece of advice and it helps you live a certain kind of way, right? And then another way to understand the word would be like someone advised me to do this rather than that in a particular situation, right? And so that'd be like the best advice that I ever got when someone said, yeah, don't be with that person, or don't do something like that, right? That would be a piece of advice. So I've got one of each of those.
Great.
And one is very related to what I do, and is in fact partly the reason I do what I do. And that was when my former youth pastor advised me to become a philosopher, essentially. So I've talked about this on some other shows about my journey to atheism. And I used to, back in the day, I felt a calling to be a minister. This is how things are termed in Protestantism. And I felt a calling to be a minister. And so I actually went to school to become a pastor. And I was going to a Southern Nazarene University, a very conservative religious school. and I was studying to be in the ministry. And then my sophomore year, I discovered philosophy and absolutely loved it. Realized that that was the kind of thing, that those kinds of questions and that kind of stuff was what I was really, really interested in. And it when I realized that what the professor was doing was what I wanted to do. Like, I thought I wanted to preach, and that was the main thing that I wanted. Like, the reason I felt called to be a pastor was because I thought I was supposed to preach, and I had done sermons before and that kind of stuff, even as a teenager. And so I came to realize kind of one of two things. One was that that's not really what a pastor does. Like, pastors mostly deal with people and that kind of stuff. Preaching's just like 10% of what they do. And secondly, it wasn't preaching that I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about philosophy. I wanted to talk about these kind of big questions and that kind of stuff that we were talking about in philosophy class. And so, but I was torn, right? Because in my young conservative self was like, well, am I forsaking my calling if I decide to go and do philosophy and blah, 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 blah. So I was home for summer one year, maybe for a break or something like that. And I sat down with my youth pastor. He actually came over to my house. I remember exactly where I was sitting at our kitchen table in our house in Guyman. And I kind of laid it out and was like, yeah, so I've discovered philosophy, and I'm kind of wanting to do that, but I don't want to forsake my calling or whatever. And he wisely just said, explain to me the freedom foreknowledge problem. I think it was the freedom foreknowledge problem. It's what I eventually wrote my dissertation on. The freedom foreknowledge problem is this idea that humans cannot be free if God infallibly knows what they are going to do before they do it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
If God is right. So if God knows what you're going to do before you do it, you can't be wrong, then you can't do otherwise. But if you can't do otherwise, then you can't be free. Right. That's the idea. And so I laid it out for him. Right. And he basically just said, like, yeah, not very many people can do that. Not very many people can explain these kinds of concepts in a way that's understandable to people. This is clearly a gift that you have. And it is a gift that should not be squandered. I don't think that you're doing anything wrong by rejecting, going into pastoral ministry and wanting to do philosophy, right? And so I switched majors. I switched to philosophy, and that's part of the reason that that I'm here today. Would I have done it without him or something like that? I don't know, right? But it was a pretty major factor in my young conservative self, who kind of took the stuff like the calling and stuff seriously, kind of snap me out of that and make me realize what I actually should be doing, right? What would be best for me to do. So that's the probably the most influential piece of advice maybe that I've received.
Let me ask you, did you think about going into theology as against to philosophy?
So no, because theology isn't philosophy. Because theology takes God's existence for granted and takes a lot of other things for granted, like authority of Scripture and that kind of stuff for granted, and then reasons from there. And I was not interested in doing that. And theology, like, it would take things like free will for granted, or other things like that I wanted to question, that I definitely had questions about, right? And I had never been one for like 100% authority of Scripture or anything like that. But it just, theology wasn't talking about the kinds of questions that I was interested in. Not to say that I didn't take theology classes. I was required, like, I became a philosophy major, but as part of the major, I had to take multiple theology classes. I had Old Testament theology, New Testament theology, systematic theology. I took some church history classes. I've had a lot of religion classes, including theology classes. But philosophy was the concentration, and I definitely the philosophy courses are what engaged me more. That said, my New Testament theology class is what made me realize that sacrificial atonement was inconsistent with God's properties. Like, I gave up belief in sacrificial atonement because of my New Testament theology class, right? And so it's not like they're not, thinking about important issues, but it just wasn't the majority of what I wanted to be doing. So that's
Sure.
why I did philosophy instead.
Does that your old youth minister know what you're doing now?
He's got to. I say that. He doesn't have to. Because he's not at that church anymore, and he went, where was he? And I'm not even sure where he's at now. So he may not know where I'm at, because I don't know where he's at.
Sure.
But I mean, all of my professors and stuff from Southern Nazarene know what I do now, right? So
Right.
it wouldn't be like, it's not like hidden knowledge or something like that, but we've lost contact. So I don't know if he knows or not.
Right. Well, you never know where you're going to get the best piece of advice from.
Yeah, right. Like it is ironic that me, an atheist philosopher, got my best piece of advice from a youth minister, right? But
Oh, right.
that right. Um, but that's the way it went, right? Yeah, yeah,
So you said you had another piece of advice.
yeah. So the other piece of advice, probably this happens a lot, comes from my mother, and but it is something that shapes my life in pretty significant ways. And she has it on her fridge. And so and it's handwritten. It's not even like she didn't buy this anywhere. She didn't like see it in a store and it's on a magnet or whatever. Put it on her fridge. There's a handwritten note on her fridge in her handwriting that's just taped to the fridge that just says three simple words: procrastination is bondage.
I've
And essentially what that means, right, is the longer you put something off, the longer you, right, every minute that you put it off, it's weighing over you, and it's distracting you, it's keeping you from doing other things, right? Like, and the sooner you get it done and out of the way, you are free from that obligation, you're free from that that work or whatever, that stress or whatever, and you're free to do something else, right? And so essentially, it's kind of a pithy way to like, don't put stuff off, don't put off today what you could do tomorrow, or that what you could do tomorrow, whatever, like do it now or whatever. But I really try to live by that. When something needs to be done, I do it quick, and this is especially with my academic work. When something comes up, I try to get it done as soon as possible. Maybe it backfires a bit because I end up doing too much and I get backlogged. So like right now I'm behind on, so I'm working on a series for Pelgrave called Pop Culture as Philosophy. And it is going to be a huge, giant handbook. I should say series, it's a handbook. With probably, it's supposed to be 750,000 words at the end. And it's an edited volume. So it's a whole bunch
Right.
of different people that are all writing different things for me or whatever. And I've got a backlog of chapters that I'm trying to get to. But I've got all these other projects I have to get to first. And there's, different stresses about what comes first or whatever. And so I'm kind of behind on that, but I'm like literally trying as hard as I can to get to them. And this little COVID quarantine might actually allow me to get to them a little bit quicker than I could before, right?
Right.
But this idea that if there's got to be something done, do it right now. Otherwise, it's kind of weighing over you and keeping you in bondage. I've always found that useful. So thanks, Mom.
How how long has that been on the refrigerator?
um, it wasn't there when I was a kid, but for as long as I can remember, it's been in the new house. My parents moved out of my childhood house and into a new house in 2000. And for as long as I can remember, it's been there. And that's since I graduated college in 2000. Um, yeah. So at least that long, if not, maybe even in the old house too. I don't remember it specifically there, but yeah. So about 20 years, I'd say.
So here's a question. Do you have that on your refrigerator at your home now?
No, I don't. We on our refrigerator, we just collect little refrigerator magnets or whatever from different places that we've been. That's what our refrigerator has. So I'm not in control of what's on my refrigerator per se.
I understand. I understand the process.
Yeah, I might, however, now with our discussion, I might actually do a little handwritten note and like put it on my computer monitor. And because that's where I really need it, right? To keep me working or whatever. So yeah.
I think those were two great pieces of advice. Thanks for coming on the show, Kyle. That was fantastic. Where can people find you online, sir?
Yeah, so you can find me online. Google David Kyle Johnson, academia.edu, and you can find my academia.edu site and pretty much find everything that I've ever published. I have 3 courses with the great courses: Exploring Metaphysics, The Big Questions of Philosophy, and a sci-fi. It's SCIPHI, Science Fiction as Philosophy, sci-fi, science fiction as philosophy. So just go to the great courses and put in David Kyle Johnson. You'll find my courses there. All of those are audio books on Audible as well. So you can find me on Amazon. Just put in David Kyle Johnson there. I have a couple of other books that you can find on Amazon on Black Mirror. That's right here behind me. There's my Black Mirror book. One on Inception. and one on Christmas, interestingly enough. So you can find me on Amazon, and on Facebook, I am Dr. David Kyle Johnson. And so I'll publish stuff about what or I'll post stuff about what I've published and that kind of stuff there as well. So that's where you can find my online work.
Fantastic, man. Well, thanks again. This has been a great conversation.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Andy. Take care.
Take care.